midterm elections, they're coming up, boys. And the pot is at a simmer now, and Democrats, they're looking around and they're going, "Hey, is there anything we can do?
Is there anything we did? This doesn't look good. What up? What? Come on, guys. Let's get some ideas.
Should we be doing something else? I don't know. We got to do something though. So, courtesy of Politico, we have an article here headlined: Democrats turn to their Gen Z whisperer as youth support wobbles. Biden's numbers with young voters took a staggering dive at the end of 2021, dipping lower than any Democratic president in decades. So that's a problem. I like to think of ourselves as sort of Gen Z whisperers.
Certainly, I always love whispering to Gen Z all the time.
I'm always saying, stop doing that thing you're doing. Stop making me feel old. Cut it out, gang. All right, so this is Politico. Democrats, they're turning to their Gen Z whisperer. Democratic senators had two charts waiting at their chairs when they arrived at a caucus luncheon in February. They showed youth participation in national elections since the 1980s, with two impossible-to-miss spikes, 2018 and 2020, when huge turnout among 18 to 30-year-olds propelled Democrats into power in Washington. These graphs led off pollster John Della Volpe's myth-busting tour on young people in politics across the top levels of the Democratic Party. Young people do vote, he told the senators, and they're not policy purists, snowflakes, or socialists either. Perhaps the most important point Della Volpe could make for that audience is that young voters are not locked up for Democrats. His pitch to engage and empower the 30 and under set comes at a uniquely perilous moment for the party. Democrats have faced brutal midterm climates and slim margins in Congress before, but the current iteration of the Democratic Party has rarely, if ever, been on such shaky ground with young people. Earlier this year, approval for President Joe Biden among people aged 18 to 30 hit depths no Democratic president had plumbed in decades. The mid to low 30s in Gallup and other polls. Barack Obama never dropped below 42% among that group in Gallup surveys. In some cases, the swing against Biden in 2021 totaled anywhere from 20 to 30 percentage points. He has since made gains in some polls, but is still on unstable ground. An alienated youth vote is an existential threat for Democrats in 2022. They backed Biden by a 25-point margin in 2020, voting at all-time highs. And in their hour of need, powerful Democrats are looking for answers from Della Volpe, a 54-year-old pollster with salt and pepper hair who is not on TikTok.
Well, I will forgive this guy's youth and inexperience, kind of on the young side for that side of things, but we'll see what he has to say. I want to say I'm finally doing it. I am going to go out on an insane limb here, a fucking insane limb, but I am confident in my predictive ability and also the ability of the audience and you guys to forget I said this if I'm wrong. I do not think that Brandon will do historically bad or even as bad as 2010 in the midterms. I do not think that. One, I think that the collapse in polling among younger voters, as we've said, inevitable, because if a group of people see the federal government help them for the first time in their life ever, and Brandon's the guy who takes it away, of course they're going to fucking hate him. That's inevitable. That was always going to happen. But it reminds me of when people would say Trump's unfavorables were worse than Hillary. It was, I could see the assumption he's going to lose to Hillary based on his unfavorables being higher, but not really. People don't measure I hate this one more than I hate that one. It comes down to a number of things, and I just do not. I do not see a significant group of under 40s going out of their way to vote for Republicans in the midterm. I still think Republicans take both houses, but I do not see that. Also, poll today that I saw, interesting, that 70-something% of Americans think that higher gas prices are Putin's fault. I mean, the type of numbers that you would get in 2001 with a different adversary. I think that bodes very poorly for the world in the future. And I'm always skeptical on issue polls. But I kind of, between that and between, I think, the shorter cycles, the shorter culture cycles that we live in, and the propensity of Republicans to overreach and freak out because you keep having to up the ante with culture war. I kind of don't think at this moment in April it is going to be that bad for them in November.
I mean, it does make you wonder where the hell Republicans are going to be in fucking November when they're already at like 11.
I'm saying,
like, Jesus Christ, like this does not play. I mean, yeah, it works for your people, but like, it really does not appear as anything other than like mental illness. But the thing is, they don't have to vote Republican, and I don't think they will. They just have to don't vote.
Yeah,
and like, the real question is, will the Republicans be so like day to day grotesque and like upping the ante on like savage culture war stuff that younger people, because they have been groomed by Disney, do not agree with, to the point that they'll feel obligated to vote just to like keep them out? Or will they just check out? And if they check out, it's going to have a similar effect because they're fucking pissed off. Brandon going parents sure as hell aren't going to check out.
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to say that I still think like Democrats lose both houses.
Yeah, with those narrow margins, they can't hold on to those. No way.
No, yeah, just how voting is in this country, and like even if they do win, the popular vote for midterms in the total vote count, that does not mean much.
That doesn't mean anything.
But it is hard for me to see, like, I mean, who knows predicting like, fucking 9 months from now with anything in the current culture. But it just, when I see like 20 pundits all say the same thing, I immediately start thinking it will not happen. Mm-hmm. I realize that is reactive and a simplistic way to look at things, but it is nonetheless how I've predicted a few things.
It's
like, it'd probably be like, like a drop off in 18 to 30-year-olds like actively voting in the midterms. But like that's usually the case in midterm elections. I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, he does mention the word Bernie Sanders in this article. We'll get to it. But like, the enthusiasm, if it's like tamped down to any degree, it's because like the Democrats in, 2 presidential elections kneecapped the candidate that was actually supported by young people. But as we learned in 2020, like most of them ended up voting for Biden anyway. I mean, the same problem is just like the people who don't vote and never will. But I will say, though, the Democrats are in a tough position right now because the Republicans, they're exciting young people. When you've got stars like David Mamet calling people who give you homework pedophiles.
This has always been the problem with education, is that teachers are inclined, particularly men, because men are predators, to pedophilia.
I mean, you've got someone who like really speaks to young people, like playwright and film director David Mamet. Like when he goes on Mark Levin, like the 18 to 30-year-olds are going to be like, who's this Mark Levin guy? Wait, he has a book out about socialism? Let me read it.
Well, David Mamet today, the thing I saw, he's redoing Scum Manifesto because he's gone from saying like all teachers are liberals and therefore pedophiles to like, well, all men are pedophiles and rapists, and if they're teachers, what do you think they're going to do? It's like they're gonna those guys who are just like their head is 90% U.S. battleship hat and aviator sunglasses are gonna write Dworkin books by accident on Free Republic. Well, no one's on Free Republic anymore. On Gab, just about how all men have an innate desire to abuse and dominate women, and therefore there should be no teachers. Yeah, no, does our 54-year-old wonderkind say anything about like the PRO Act or unions in here? Because that is kind of the one way I could see Biden not just eating shit by less than expected, but like maybe pulling out one of Irish Joe's famous tricks.
Well, let's continue on. So the 54-year-old pollster with salt and pepper hair who is not on TikTok. He's hailed by industry colleagues and political operatives on both sides of the aisle for an encyclopedic knowledge of young voters, said Kristen Soltis Anderson, a Republican pollster. John Anzalone, Biden's lead campaign pollster, said Della Volpe's data yields so much depth of understanding of a misunderstood group. Della Volpe has led Harvard University's Institute of Politics Youth Poll since its inception in 2000, with former students including House GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik and Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Della Volpe's longitudinal insight into young voters, what moves them, how they feel about politicians, and whether they're going to unplug from politics altogether matters deeply for Democrats, especially ahead of 2022. They're also not as broadly studied or understood as, say, independents, even though they represent a core part of the party's base and their numbers are fluctuating. The party goes into midterms in an unusual place with young people, Della Volpe said in an interview. There are more younger people in play than there were in the last two cycles. The interesting thing there is he says, like, young people are an understudied group in politics, as opposed to, I mean, like, they're probably the most studied group when it comes to, like, marketing. But, like, they said, like, unlike independents, which are, like, studied meticulously by pollsters, it's like, I don't think that's the case because, like, just like this salt and pepper haired pollster has come along to fucking teach them about young people. It's just that, like, the American independent voter and the issues that matter to them are the issues that politicians already hope to achieve and care about. So, like, if you're like, it's easy to study a group that's telling you exactly that what you're doing is right and that you should continue doing it. Or, I mean, like, independents will say, like, I hate politicians, but, like, you know, the gas prices are too high, and also people aren't paying enough for it. That kind of shit. Going on, where Democrats spent past elections mostly worried about whether young people would vote, this cycle is different, Della Volpe continued. In the face of economic unrest, disinformation, and without former President Donald Trump as a foil, he said, Democrats need to persuade them and mobilize them. That is the new reality. The pollster who was part of Biden's team during the 2020 general election still has the ear of many in the administration. He's one of those trusted voices people in the White House turn to for advice, said one senior Biden advisor. Della Volpe has recently
Shouldn't
made
that be all you need to hear to know to not listen to him?
Della Volpe has recently made several presentations with the White House staff, according to people familiar with the meetings. Biden's yo-yoing numbers with young people should concern everyone, said John Walsh, Senator Ed Markey's chief of staff, who managed the Massachusetts Democrats' successful primary campaign in 2020, which drew unusually high support among young voters for a 75-year-old senator. Government is not acting with urgency this moment demands, and they're frustrated, pissed off. I worry that some people are not listening to John, Walsh added. I mean, I'm just like, maybe we'll get to it, but I'm waiting for something in the piece.
Yeah, what's the deal?
What is prescriptive here? What is prescriptive? What are they going to do? What are they going to get to get young people out to vote?
Well, this is the Democrat special with, like, anybody or anything. It's just like pledging to listen and hear and to understand voices, I guess. Talk about guided by voices. Get Jay Carney on the horn.
Felix, this is the next line in this article.
Oh, boy.
Della Volpe has spent much of the last 2 decades listening to young people.
Hell yeah.
Wow. Well, so is Bill Clinton.
In 2000, Della Volpe conducted his first youth survey with 2 Harvard University students who wanted to understand why college students participated in community service but didn't vote. At the time, Della Volpe had built a polling and market research business around dial testing, cutting-edge technology of the day in which participants would rate their reaction to political speeches or campaign ads on a manual dial. His roster of clients included President Bill Clinton, Senator Ted Kennedy, and major corporations. But specifically, polling youth filled the void. No one was listening to younger people, Della Volpe said. Even now, young people are more difficult and expensive to survey. They're more transient, less comfortable picking up an unknown phone number, and more likely to require different language options. They didn't vote, so candidates didn't appeal to them or target them. And then they didn't vote, so it was a vicious cycle repeating, Della Volpe said. So, okay, like, I keep hearing...
I wonder why they don't pick up unusual phone numbers, the thing that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
He's been listening to the youth. And most people, he's filling a void. No one's listening to the youth. What are the youth saying? John, or Della Volpe, please tell me what young people are saying. You've been listening to them for 2 decades.
What are they saying?
What are they saying? What are they saying?
What do the young people say?
Okay.
It sounds like the last young people, by the way, that Della Volpe actually spoke with himself are now in their 50s.
Since 2000, the Harvard Youth Poll has grown in scope, publishing twice a year with undergraduates developing questions and Della Volpe editing and sharpening them. In 2018, citing his own data, Della Volpe predicted that young people would show up in historic numbers, calling Trump's first midterm a moment of a once-in-a-generation attitudinal shift around voting. Some pollsters rolled their eyes, but Della Volpe was right. 36% of 18 to 29-year-olds voted that cycle, almost doubling 2014 rates and beating any previous midterm participation since the 80s. The Harvard Youth Poll has been the only consistent data set to look at change over time on this stuff, said Ben Wessel, who served from 2019 to 2021 as executive director of Next Gen America, the largest Democratic group focused on youth mobilization. Because of this longevity, he catches trends between politics and not politics that the rest of the political world could really learn from. What are they? Tell me, what are these guys? What are the gems that he has to impart here?
You got to pay for them.
I'm halfway through this fucking article.
This article is like going to a Turkish ice cream stand. My God.
Give me the goddamn
Get to
cone.
the fucking point. Let me hold the fucking cone. Jesus.
Della Volpe also regularly runs focus groups, which make him extremely effective at going beyond percentages and crosstabs. A much more nuanced way of getting to the true viewpoint, says Matt Barretto, a Democratic pollster who worked with Della Volpe on the Biden campaign. What's the true viewpoint? I've heard this guy Della Volpe's name 15. Okay. All right. Sorry. Gotta refocus here.
Della Volpe was an Eagle Scout where in his first encounter with young people. At only age 54, he's been known to wear shorts to a barbecue, upsetting the pin-straight acolytes of the Democratic Party. Della Volpe doesn't just know young people, he hears them.
Indeed, Della Volpe's interest is less focused on quantitative feedback than on stories, describing it as almost a kind of political therapy. He zeroed in on how Gen Z is defined by anxiety through key events, including Trump's election in 2016 and the Parkland school shooting in 2018. It has made them suspicious of institutions and impatient for change, he wrote in his book, Fight, How Gen Z is Channeling Their Fear and Passion to Save America. In recent focus groups conducted over Zoom with 24 Gen Zers, Della Volpe started by asking them to share something good that had happened to them recently. He followed up by asking if they felt like their personal lives were on the right track, and if they weren't, why? He asked them about their mental health, the pressures and stresses they face. In both 90-minute sessions, it took nearly an hour before he explicitly asked about politics or politicians. Focus on values first, second, and third, Della Volpe said. It's perhaps a unique perspective in politics. No, it's not. That's what
they all say because it's free.
They all say. Yeah.
Values is free. You don't have to promise anything. You don't have to say we're going to fund something or change something. You could just say we have these values. It's the cheapest. They love hearing this shit. What you're saying that I could fucking just put out some goddamn to TikToks with noted celebs saying how much we value young people and how the Republicans are actually not based, that they're actually cringe or whatever the fuck. They love hearing that.
So yeah, this 54-year-old boy genius, he's gonna get like Tony Coelho to do a TikTok where he's like, "Yo, having anxiety is chuggy. Let's vote blue." all the unindicted characters from The Ambition and the Power are gonna show up. Actually, not on a TikTok, on like Vimeo.
I'm skipping ahead a little bit because I'm trying to get to the beef here. Okay, so he says it starts with communication. Della Volpe said. Della Volpe.
Fucking God.
Della Volpe.
Okay.
Della Volpe. Della Volpe. It starts with
political campaign involves communicating.
It starts with communication.
That's kind of wild that you brought that up, dude.
It starts with communication. Suggests regular check-ins to update them on policy progress, and citing Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, disciplined cadence of Instagram posts as one example of this practice. Okay,
hell yeah! I want to see Steny Hoyer dropping it like it's hot on Instagram Live.
So it starts with communication, then empower them, Della Volpe said. He noticed that Democrats can sometimes stand in their own way in reaching young people because they're intimidated. They get weighed down in the transactional nature of politics. Della Volpe pointed to the tack Biden took as he locked up the Democratic presidential nomination. Say, where do we agree with Bernie Sanders groups? Where do we agree? And what's the process to get there?
Well, isn't that, you can only really do that one time though, right? Like they said it. And of course, like all of the center left pundits just like fell all over themselves because, they all said, look, even the ones who like were pro Bernie and didn't like Biden, they're like, look, we got to beat Trump. This is the most important election of all time. So we have to convince these rubes that Biden shares their values. And so everybody went all in on that. And it probably worked to an extent because people wanted it to work because they wanted to get rid of Trump. But now it's been 2 years that they've just been putting fucking cigarettes out in people's eyes for that entire time.
Well,
Yeah. I mean, I don't care how many voices you listen to. You can't undo that one. And like, again, as we said a million times, your first time ever seeing generous federal unemployment checks, and then fucking mean old Brandon takes it away. Do a million surveys. That's not going to fucking help you.
And also, I mean, during the 2020 Democratic primary, all the other candidates had to pretend they agreed with Bernie. Biden probably won because he was the only one who just said straight up, I don't believe in anything Bernie Sanders stands for. I'm not for universal health care.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, just
and then everybody decided to just pretend that didn't happen for the general because had to get rid of Trump.
Well, he
and then
killed
on the fucking ballot, the entire the like spectacle of emergency is gone. And yes, they can say, "Oh, they're coming for us. They're going to get rid of democracy." But if you don't have Trump out there bellowing, it's just not the same thing.
I mean, what more does he have to do? He killed neoliberalism. Come on now.
So, where do we agree with Bernie Sanders groups? Where do we agree, and what's the process to get there? I mean, again, as the problem here is that they don't agree with anything that Bernie Sanders supported, and so there's no way to get there. So just keep listening, Della Volpe. He says here, Della Volpe listed a handful of policy areas. Oh, thank God. All right. Listed a handful of policy areas where potential executive actions from Biden would very quickly capture the attention of young people. The list includes student debt, mental health, climate change, and dealing with the rising cost of living.
Mental health? What?
In large part, they have been following up on these issues. But what? Like,
well, no,
okay.
Yeah. So every time, like the Biden diehards will do this. Like anytime that there's someone will be like, "Oh, they're not doing anything." They'll point to like an executive order that like usually does not really go as far as it could or maybe should, and go, "Oh, not doing anything." But it's, I mean, that's if like people who are online like 18 hours a day are going, have to be shown that. How are you going to get like people who vote maybe every other presidential election, or especially like 20-year-olds?
In large part, they have been following up on these issues, but it's about extending the conversation in new and different ways to remind people that we're not finished, Della Volpe said, citing as one example is Biden's announcement of a mental health initiative during his State of the Union address.
People can't stop talking about it. I can't. Every time I pass the Zoomers going around on their Beyblades, I keep hearing them talk about how fresh that proposal was. The one that I remember.
What is this? The mental health initiative? Okay, all right.
It's an initiative. What else you want?
It's an initiative to improve mental health.
They're taking the initiative on mental health,
and we need to. But the thing is, we need to continue this conversation in new and exciting ways, and check in with young people to know that, like, hey, that mental health initiative, we're still thinking about it.
Yeah, we're still absolutely thinking about initiating mental health. We will initiate mental health any day now. Just wait.
Major progressive outside groups, though, think Biden can go much further. Much further than the mental health initiative? Who the fuck are these people?
Yeah, what the hell?
Just come on. Like politics is the art of the possible.
For Christ's
Politics is the art of the possible, okay? And announcing a major mental health initiative at the State of the Union address, I mean, what more do you want from him? He goes, they argue that he should cancel student debt altogether or work more aggressively on his climate agenda. Next Gen America's president, Christine Ramirez, says, young people want to see action, and that's why we're yelling as loud as we can. Please take action on student debt, because this is within the power of the Biden administration. Last week, the Biden administration announced another 4 months extension of the pause on monthly loan payment and interest. It's been over a year of a Democratic trifecta, and young people are really disappointed because not much has been accomplished around student debt or on ambitious climate goals, said Ellen Scales, a press secretary for the Sunrise Movement. People are losing hope. Biden has turned his numbers around with young people before, a saga that may show a path forward for him in the next 6 months. During the presidential primary, Biden's numbers with young people were also upside down. At the time, Della Volpe took a group of students to Charleston to conduct a focus group in February 2020, a week before the South Carolina primary. They dropped by a Biden event, and we probably doubled the size of the crowd, Della Volpe acknowledged. After the event, Valerie Biden Owens, Biden's sister and a former Harvard Institute of Politics fellow, spoke to Della Volpe's students, then pulled him aside for his private assessment of the primary race. It's not looking too good, Della Volpe told her. Biden had just finished 4th in Iowa and 5th in New Hampshire. He was about to come in 2nd place in Nevada. Owens, who got to know Della Volpe well during her stint at Harvard, told him, John, you've got to talk to my brother because you were saying what my brother intuitively and instinctively knows. But you also have all this data here, she recounted in an interview with Politico. You relate the way that my brother relates, which is spoken like a true sister, but my brother speaks in stories. A turning point for the Biden and young voters came before Della Volpe joined the Biden campaign later that year. But Della Volpe pointed to it as a sign Biden knew how to reach them, saying, I hear you to Bernie Sanders supporters, especially young voters in March 2020. Those 3 simple words, Della Volpe wrote in his book, were everything millions of Zoomers were waiting to hear.
Wait a minute. Is he claiming that there was some youth shift to Biden before he secured the nomination?
I think that's what he's saying.
Is that the claim here?
Well, I mean, like he said, he said, I hear you.
I don't know if I trust your police work there, Lou, because you can't say anything once he has the nomination. It's meaningless. Where else are they going to go? They're not going to vote for Trump.
John reinforced to Joe that people just want to be heard, reinforcing Joe's natural way of doing things. Look, I mean, if Della Volpe...
if they just want to be heard, then why are you talking about doing anything about anything?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if Della Volpe...
You should be talking about him building like a giant... You know what? This whole thing, if they were going to be consistent and not try to like... Because I think they understand at the end of the day, even a fucking, lobotomized DCite will read this and be like, really? Just listening? That kind of sounds dumb and a cop-out. They're like, they panic and they're like, oh no, initiatives, take songs. If they were really serious about this concept of politics, they should say that what Biden needs to do is go on tour in the fall with one of those old-timey ear horns and just lean towards the crowd and say, speak up, Sonny.
I think there is a way to like at least, maybe retain the House. Probably not, but like do decently well, right? And I think that way is something that, we only see hints of things and never any real follow-up with anything. But it would be, we saw Brandon take on Amazon at that pre-bedtime press conference. And like, okay, theoretically, we are going into the most theoretical of the theoretical thing that will never fucking happen because this is the Democrats. But if this was like the summer of the fucking PRO Act, and he's going all over the place. He's going on tour just like us to talk about the PRO Act, and he's bringing out everyone's favorite all-stars, like Bernie, and putting public pressure on, and that's all they talk about: organized labor, Starbucks, fucking Amazon, everything. Then I could see that paying dividends, but that is not going to happen. I mean, I could see the Biden Democratic Party PRO Act summer and fall of rallies possibly coinciding with the based Republicans' proposal to withdraw from NATO. Those are both going to happen at the same time. They're equally likely.
I mean, just reading this article, I think a problem with a lot of these youth polls he's running is that like everyone he's talking to seems to have gone to Harvard.
Yeah.
So like, for those motherfuckers, just being listened to by powerful people is like all they want.
Yeah, they just want a little therapeutic session, and they want, they're themselves to feel like they're the center of the universe for a second.
And
they're the only Americans who like give any stock into being heard.
And if Della Volpe's, if these polls and his sort of like youth whispering, if there's any truth to it all, that young people just want to be heard and that's it, then young people deserve nothing, and will continue to get nothing. And like, honestly, they deserve it if that's the case. They just want an old man to listen to them and say, I hear you.
Especially when you know for a fact that it will immediately shoot from one ear to the other and be replaced by a story about the time that he got a hand job in a 57 DeSoto.
All right. Finishing out this article here, it says, it's to reinforce Joe's natural way of doing things, which is just telling stories. So Scales, who organized on behalf of Elizabeth Warren during the presidential primary, said Biden was not young voters' favorite primary candidate. Which that was Elizabeth Warren, of course. But once Biden became the nominee, he honestly stepped up and started listening to young people, putting together the Bernie Biden Unity Task for listening to young people, putting together the Bernie Biden unity task for and moving on his climate agenda. The oldest presidential nominee in history eventually achieved historic support from young people in the general election. But
Yes,
now,
because he was running against Donald Trump.
but now, after 2 years of a stalled agenda, items important to young people, Democrats are worried about where young people are in terms of not feeling engaged or motivated right now, said Ben Tolchin, Democratic pollster, whose clients include Sanders and New York City Mayor Eric Adams. You have to give them a reason to show up now, Tolchin said. So that's the end of the article. But it's just like, I mean, all this listening, all this story stuff, and they're just saying young people, they feel frustrated that these agenda items that are important to them seem to be stalled out. Well, I mean, like, there's no amount of polling that can do away with the fact that the Democratic Party does not want to enact any of these policy items that are popular with young people. They do not. They're ideologically opposed to it, top to bottom.
They couldn't if they wanted to either, because there's no party. I mean, they can't. Like, one of the biggest things that just destroyed Brandon's poll numbers is when they got rid of the child allowance. Yeah, and that was just because Joe Manchin actually believes in the deficit, and that's because there's no mechanism to make any fucking senator do anything they don't want to do. So they can't act as a party. So it doesn't matter what they want. And yes, it doesn't help that they don't want it either. But like, they cannot do a coordinated policy push, especially with the slim margins they have. So they can't do anything, and they can listen. That's for sure. They can do that. That's free.
Yeah, have they tried employing a 53-year-old to listen?
I mean, if there's an October surprise for the midterms, it's going to be that they cancel some significant chunk of student debt, which is a thing that the White House could just do, which is untrue of all those other things, and a thing that wouldn't fuck off too many powerful institutions.
By the way, I wish I did not make my prediction before hearing that article.
Yeah, seriously.
Now I think every Democratic representative is going to be murdered, actually, in trials that they vote to be a part of. But yeah, like I'm hesitant and pessimistic on any student loan thing, because it's like
not going to happen.
I mean, it's one of the greatest anti-inflation tools the federal government has ever had. You're not just going to get rid of that. I don't think. I could be wrong, though. What if they do that and literally every Democrat loses? And
could still happen, as I said. I mean, like, yay, student loans are good. Maybe I have something else that day that matters more to me than voting for some CIA agent.
Yeah. Is Abby Asperger going to win?
I
hope so. I love her. She's a firecracker. Yeah.
I gotta believe she's not going to get elected in that seat. We'll see, though.
I love her because, like, in 2018, when all these like shitty CIA agents got elected, they're like, "I want to thank black women with an X," and blah blah blah. And then the second they come within like 1 point of losing, they're like, "These fucking blacks and gays are ruining my life and are gonna make me fucking lose." Just takes one moment of frustration. You see the mask comes off.
God, just like reading that whole article, I just had the Spinal Tap song, "Listen to What the Flower People Say," just sort of wafting through my brain. Listen to what the flower people say. Shh. Listen, it's getting louder every day. And they're all screaming at Della Volpe. Hear us. Listen, tell us stories, Grandpa. Tell us the corn pop story again.
For you, that may have been what you've experienced. For me, hearing that article, it was like Batman interrogating the Joker. They wouldn't tell me what the fucking point was. I couldn't find out where Rachel was. And I need to talk to her to find out what young voters want.